We have two tragic developments regarding the Netflix One Piece live-action project, the first of which is a showrunner leaving the show, and a second has to do with the episodes of Season 2 which have also delivered some disappointing news. But starting with the former, Mr. Matt Owens, co-showrunner of One Piece live-action, has announced the following. The last 6 years working on the live-action One Piece has been a life-changing journey, a dream come true. It's also been a lot, so I'm stepping off the Going Merry to take a break and focus on myself and my mental health. Thank you so much to Oda, Shueisha, Tomorrow Studios, Netflix, and the entire cast and crew for your trust, partnership, and hard work. For now, I'm gonna take a breath, do some therapy, try to rank up in Marvel Rivals, and come back refreshed for the new adventures that await. Thanks to everyone who has supported me. See you real soon. So first and foremost, I think we all obviously want to wish Matt all the best, because I think that his contribution has been quite underrated to the One Piece live action. I think that he is a colossal part of what made Season 1 the curse breaker that it was, and I do hope that he's able to nurture and better his mental health. Although, I don't know if Ranked Rivals is going to be conducive to that. Now, a lot of people are trying real hard to read various things into this statement, which I think is pointless. The wording is pretty deliberately vague, so anyone who's absolutely certain on what's going on here is just lying to themselves. Because to me, this reads like a fairly standard company-approved piece of publicity, which are deliberately engineered to not say anything. So despite using words like break, refreshed, and new adventures, I don't think there's any guarantee that he'll return or that it's his intent to return, but I also don't think there's any guarantee that he won't. Dunno, it's a lot of nothing. Although new adventures, especially to me, feels like the LinkedIn way of saying that he's stepping back from the industry as a whole at the moment and will return for new projects, new challenges, but not necessarily One Piece. I've seen a lot of people really stress the word break, as if Matt's now on holiday and he'll be coming back for Season 3, but I can't imagine an announcement like this happening if that was the case. If it was just a between the season break, then why bother? So to me, this does feel a lot like I'm leaving and I don't know if/when I'll be back. But this also obviously isn't structured like a permanent goodbye, and he could very well be back in the future. But the slightly more morbid question that I have in response to this news is, will there be a future to come back to? As of recording this video, Season 2 has wrapped filming, which to a lot of people would indicate that we're pretty much good for release, yeah? But no, not yeah. Because post-production takes much longer than actual shooting time, and the very unfortunate thing is that Matt will not be there for that post-production. That's very important because post-production is where everything truly takes form. Shooting all of the scenes is making the clay that you then mold during editing. And arguably it's where a showrunner is the most essential, because it's where all of these micro decisions that make or break the show come into play. Look, here's a great example. Due to the actors and writers strikes, Matt Owens wasn't present for the editing of the last 2 episodes of Season 1, and he has publicly expressed confusion at the outcome of those episodes, as have I. Specifically, having cut all of Usopp's key moments in his fight against Chu, which were apparently shot but just not used. And all of that is now in the hands of Joe Trace, who is currently the sole showrunner and was not present for Season 1. He is a relatively new recruit. And look, this could turn out quite well, but what I'm worried about is losing Matt's attention to detail as a pretty extreme One Piece fan. This might sound like the elitist ramblings of a man on the internet, but to give another example, it was not confirmed, but reportedly Matt Owens, who fought to not cover the entire Alabasta saga in Season 2 and instead end with Drum Island. And look, again, we haven't seen the results of this decision yet, but trying to do the entire Alabasta saga in just Season 2 would have been a colossal disaster, and I think we all know that. And I just don't know if a relatively fresh showrunner is going to be able to fight for decisions like that, because with Matt Owens, there was a huge degree of trust between him and Oda directly. And we may now be in very dangerous territory of the industry stepping in and taking charge, which has led to the tanking of every other live action project. And yes, Eiichiro Oda is still involved, but as I always say, I can never say this enough, he is not nearly as involved as some people would like to think. A lot of fans seem to have this mental image of Oda in the writer's room and audition rooms, having discussions with set designers and CGI artists. He's not doing any of that. He's an EP. He is sticking his head in every now and then to give bits of feedback, usually at final stages, and that's about it. And in Season 1, yes, they did pay for reshoots based on Oda's feedback, because they didn't want to release the season until he was satisfied, which was great, but Eiichiro Oda himself has said that this is a verbal contract and it's based entirely in trust. They don't have to listen to him at all if they don't want to. And Matt is the kind of person who understands the value of that trust. And I'm just not confident that anyone else at Netflix and Tomorrow Studios is going to honor that. Tomorrow Studios especially because they also made the live-action Cowboy Bebop, a production which completely ignored the input of Cowboy Bebop creator Shinichiro Watanabe, and it bombed pretty heavily after release. I think it's also not an amazing sign to have such a quick rotation of showrunners. Steven Maeda left after season 1, Matt Owens leaving halfway through season 2, and who knows how long Joe Trace lasts because let's be fair here, all three of them have an impossible job. They are charged with taking the most unadaptable manga series possible and adapting it to live action within a strict mandate of episodes dictated by Netflix. It is not an enviable position to be in, because you have all of the expectations of tens of millions of fans all around the world completely fixated on your every move. And art is usually created with a lot more freedom and a lot less supervision than that. And with season 2, Netflix does unfortunately appear to be restricting that freedom even more. Because it has been reported, not confirmed, this has not been announced, but reported from a reliable source that season 2 will only contain 7 episodes, which is 1 less than season 1. And we also have a breakdown of what each of those episodes will contain. Episode 1 is going to be Logtown, 2 Reverse Mountain, 3 is Whiskey Peak, 4 and 5 will be Little Garden, and finally 6 and 7 are for Drum Island, which altogether is 59 chapters in the season compared to the 95 chapters that season 1 attempted to cover. And honestly, I don't have a huge amount of problem with this until we get to Drum Island. The fact that that's only 2 episodes long does make me a bit nervous. And I know on paper it sounds fairly reasonable because look, Syrup Village, that was only 20 chapters, and Drum, it's not much more, just 25 chapters long. That is until you remember that most of Syrup Village actually had to be cut to fit it into those 2 episodes, so the fact that Drum Island is 25% longer with the same amount of time is very concerning to me. Something else to keep in mind about the episode count is that the chapters are not going to be spread evenly across the 7 episodes. So we're covering 59 chapters, right? Amazing, but it's not 59 divided evenly by 7, which would be about 8.5 chapters per episode. Some episodes are going to be extremely content heavy, whilst others are going to be extremely content light. For example, Logtown is only 5 chapters and it's getting a whole episode to itself. There's so much room to breathe in that one episode that they're reportedly adding extra stuff, such as the alleged casting of Bartolomeo to be in that episode, which is really cool. And if they wanted to, they can always pull from the Logtown novel and anime filler, which was quite enjoyable as well. So I think that there's a pretty easy recipe for a great first episode, just like season 1, extremely strong opening. Then episode 2 is Reverse Mountain, which is also only 5 chapters long. So very manageable with a lot of room to breathe. And I imagine that some of the live action original stuff they would add would be showing Calico Yorkie and perhaps even giving us a glimpse of Brooke for the first time. Meanwhile, episode 3 is Whiskey Peak, and this arc is 9 chapters, so there's much less room for original stuff here if they still want to hit all of the necessary beats of Whiskey Peak. And look, 9 chapters, it doesn't sound like a big number, but it is so much more than people think. For comparison, a good 20-minute anime episode has an adaptation rate of about 2.5 chapters. Sometimes 3 if they're really pushing it, if it's a lot of action. That is the sweet spot of not going too quickly and not going too slowly. And whilst anime can't be directly compared to live action, we are still riding a very fine line here, because we've got a story that should take 1 hour and 20 minutes to tell, and we'll be trying to squeeze that into about 50 to 60 minutes going by the season 1 timings. And remember, that's just raw Whiskey Peak. That's before any live action content is added or changes are made, which takes time away. So right now, episode 3 does feel like the one where things could start to get a bit choppy and shaky. But when it comes to episodes 4 and 5 covering Little Garden, I think that this is about as perfect as we could get, because Little Garden is only 15 chapters. So that's 2 episodes of 7 chapters each, and that is an absolute gift of an arc for the TV pacing format, and I'm expecting pretty solid things. Again, as long as there's not too much original material and B stories taking up time. So we've got 2 episodes left, right? And this is where the time imbalance starts to worry me, because we're now 5 episodes into a 7-episode season, and what we've got left are 25 chapters to squeeze in. Almost half of the chapter count from Logtown to Drum Island is Drum Island itself, and I think that trying to do an arc of this size in only 2 episodes has proved to be a bad idea in the past. Season 1 did this with Arlong Park, which is 27 chapters, and condensing it into only 2 episodes meant that we had to really blitz blitz through it, dumbing down ideas, cutting out a lot of action, and really forgetting the point of One Piece, which is that it's about the journey and not the destination, as we desperately raced for that destination. And in defense of the production, they were originally planning on having 3 hour-long episodes back when Netflix originally asked for a 10-episode season 1. And the same thing also happened with Baratier, which is also 27 chapters long, exact same as Arlong. Crazy. But in the live action, Baratier was condensed into 2 episodes. And it did that at the cost of abandoning, no exaggeration, this has been worked out, about 90% of what actually happened in the manga. And neither scenario is great in my mind. To fit an arc of this length into 2 episodes, it either needs to be rushed or gutted. So I'm really not feeling amazing about Drum Island, and that's a real shame, because I would be all in if we just had 8 episodes. If we had 8, I would be feeling very confident about everything except for Whiskey Peak, but at that point, who cares? As long as everything else gets what it needs, we can afford a little blip. And I don't think that Netflix is cutting things down to 7 episodes just because they can. To me, it feels like it may have been part of a deal struck to have production of season 2 and 3 approved, with season 3 probably focusing exclusively on Alabasta, and it may even have less episodes. Although Alabasta is a 63 chapter arc, so 4 more chapters than we're daring to try and cover in the season 2, so I hope it doesn't have too many less episodes. A lot more happens in Alabasta than most people remember. There is a lot of very integral setup. It's not just all wars and fighting, and I personally wouldn't want to do it in any less than 6 episodes, because I already feel like that's pretty damn tight. But all of that was very long-winded, show your working way of saying, don't trust simple maths, because it's not 59 chapters distributed equally across 7 episodes. Drum Island has 40% more content than Little Garden, and it's getting the same number of episodes to bring it to life. And look, here's what's probably gonna happen, right? We need to really take the shears to Drum Island, and where those shears are gonna hit hardest is probably gonna be Chopper, because it's gonna make budgetary sense to cut as many scenes of him as possible, because that boy's gonna be expensive to bring to life. Which is not good for Drum Island, because Chopper, he's the heart of Drum Island. But some episodes in season 2, they're gonna have a really lovely time casually playing with 5 chapters, whilst others are gonna have their backs completely broken, desperately trying to carry the weight of 13. But even that's a bit too simplistic, because there are other considerations. Something else which I've mentioned before in these live action videos, and indeed in this one I think, is the B-plot. Something seen as quite a necessity for television. And if you add up all the time that the B-plot in season 1 took up with Kobe, Garp, and Helmeppo, then it totals almost 1 full episode's worth of time. So going by the numbers, East Blue only really had 7 episodes to adapt its material, whilst the TV-geared B-plot took up a whole 8th. And my worry is that they'll try to do something similar with season 2. Add in a B-plot with Tashigi and Smoker in the place of Kobe and Garp, which I do think would feel a lot more natural at the very least. There is an actual B story going on during the Alabasta saga. We just don't see a lot of it. But if it took up a similar amount of time to the B-plot in season 1, then we could have a situation where Logtown to Drum Island is effectively only 6 episodes of time. And to be fair, look, this might work out just fine if the B-plot is front-loaded into the season, taking up its time during chapter-light episodes like Logtown and Reverse Mountain, but quite lean during the chapter-intensive ones. With that said, I still want to be clear, I'm feeling much more positive about season 2 than I was about season 1, even with the news of Matt Owens leaving. Even with 7 episodes, I think the pacing is already significantly more manageable. And there's a lot of other things that I'm remaining cautiously optimistic about. I guess the major one is Chopper. He's a very make or break element, but from what we've seen so far, he did look very good in that brief shot we saw of him in the promo video. But we do also know who the directors of these 7 episodes are. There's 4 of them all in all, and 2 of them are returning from season 1. But there are some key names not returning, namely Mark Jobst and Tim Southam, both of whom directed the best received episodes of season 1, being Romance Dawn, Orangetown, and the Baratier episodes. And neither of them are returning for season 2, whilst the directors of Syrup Village and Arlong Park are. In defense of Syrup Village, I feel like this is an unpopular opinion, but I quite liked those episodes in terms of direction, and I think that Emma Sullivan did a pretty fantastic job with what she was given, remembering that it wasn't her choice to shaft Usopp in his own arc. That would have been a writing decision. So I'm pretty keen to see more of her, and she'll be directing the first 2 episodes of season 2, which are covering Logtown and Reverse Mountain. But I'm slightly less keen on episode 3, which is covering Whiskey Peak and being directed by Joseph Waladika, who did the Arlong episodes in season 1, which I feel were the weakest in all areas of production, but to give Joseph the same grace I did Emma, Netflix mandating the episode count and the decisions of the writers was out of his control, and then the industrial strikes also had an effect on editing and post-production, so maybe he just got caught up in a big ol' massive mess. But at the moment, I also don't feel like the hour-long episodes had a very strong directorial vision either, but I'm hoping to be proved wrong. In other news, there was a leak of Mr. 3's wax candelabra on set. I'm not going to show it in this video because this image is being hit with copyright claims on the Twitter, and I don't want to be hit by that stuff here, but it does look pretty damn accurate. It's hard to tell, but it does feel much smaller in scale to the manga and anime, but we will see. Either way, I was excited to see this for two reasons. The first is that it's stupid, so stupid. The candelabra is incredibly weird and a very convoluted part of One Piece, and it's the sort of thing that any other live-action production would look at and just immediately cut. No, we're not doing that. It's weird, it's expensive to make happen. What's the benefit of having it happen? No, they cut it and they do something original, but inevitably much worse. So I do have a lot of respect for One Piece live action for going down this path. Although again, I feel like this was something that Matt really fought for, and that without a presence like him, we wouldn't be doing this at all. And it also gives me hope that they're going to do Mr. 3's Candle Champion armor in its full glory, which is something that I can also see being quite awkward to make, operate, and film. One Piece live action is a really interesting problem for cinematographers, because so much of what happens in One Piece involves something that has never been filmed before, and so there's no reference or experience in regards to how to do it. I think this is very apparent with a lot of Luffy fights in season 1. Whenever Luffy stretched, it was to very mixed results, not just because of the CGI, but because the cinematography wasn't there to support it. And unfortunately, there's no one on the planet you can hire to make that any less risky, because live action rubber combat isn't something we've been able to explore and develop as much as, say, sword fighting or kick fighting, which is why all of Zoro's scenes tend to feel a lot tighter and more engaging than Luffy's. Because as a species, we've now had over a century's worth of eyes of cinematographers focused on innovating sword combat. And just to add to that, for season 2, Makenyu, Zoro's actor, brought his own Japanese stunt team with him to train and shoot with. That is how well explored the field of sword choreography is. But you'd best believe that there's no world-class team of global rubber combat stuntologists for Iñaki to consult. With rubber combat, we're still very much at the beginning of figuring that out. To compare it once again to, the advent of film, let's say that those old Fantastic Four movies, they were silent films, and the stretching that we're seeing in One Piece live action is us discovering how to use sound for the first time. It's an incredible innovation, but we haven't refined it. There is still an incredibly long way to go. But TLDR, giant wax mech fighting also isn't something that we've explored a whole lot in live action either, and neither is most of what happens in One Piece. That's the big challenge. Another example would be Robin's abilities. They're incredibly weird, and flower sprouting limbs is not hugely well explored in media at this current point in time. Now, with all of that said, we're still potentially on track for a release in 2025. The official Netflix website posted an article promoting the live-action Lego set, where they wrote, "New episodes of One Piece will arrive later this year," although it was subsequently edited to remove the part about new episodes being released this year, so maybe not. There was also a promotional video where Buggy's actor revealed the release here, but they muted his audio, but you can clearly see his mouth saying 5, because 5 is different to 6. So it looks like they were aiming for 5, but they're going, maybe it's 6. Because post-production for this show is gonna take a while, and that big time sink is gonna be CGI, especially bringing Tony Chopper to life. So I do remain optimistic for season 2, although every new announcement does kick that down a notch, with less episodes and many of the key contributors of season 1 either leaving or not electing to return for season 2. But you let me know what you think about all of this in the comments.